Okay, let's get started. Combat animation for games. Again, I'm Jason Shum, and combat animation in games is everywhere basically, right? And think of any game that you've played, any game that you've seen, probably has some kind of form of combat in it, and it can range from definitely the kind of super realistic to super cartoony and everything in between. We're going to touch on not just the not just the key poses that you use, the different processes that you use to create combat animation, but let's talk a little bit about the different kinds of combat animation. So when you're creating combat, you want to think about the intent, right? And just getting the context of what you're trying to create. You may know that you're going to work on a game that has a certain type of feel, like I said, realistic or cartoony. But these are the kind of questions that I tend to ask myself when I'm creating combat. First one is, what is the personality, mood, or tone? A lot of times, the main character is, either aggressive or that kind of personality trait. So you want to talk to anyone who's involved, and if it's just you, if that you're the decision maker on that, then you need to kind of determine what the backstory is. Why is it important for combat? Well, I think it's not just important for combat, but it's just important for animation in general, right? If you have some kind of intent or direction there, you can kind of pull from that when you're creating animation, and everything kind of comes from that personality, that mood, that tone, and it'll make everything feel more cohesive. So in our case, what I'll be creating is something kind of high flying, aggressive, personality being aggressive, and the mood being being serious, but also kind of has like a kind of a little bit of edge to it, I guess. So that's the first question, and then the second thing I tend to look at is my character melee, ranged, brute force, kind of tanky, magic dealing. What are the weapons it has, and how does it use it? If it's melee, then maybe your combat is more kind of like you're kind of more compact, and you kind of want to get close, and you want to do your damage up close. Right? If you're ranged, maybe you have a weapon that like a bow and arrow, a gun of some kind, and you're the type that's kind of staying outside of the fray and taking people out that way. Brute force, maybe you're the tank. You come in first. You start throwing people around, and everybody else comes in after. Or those are the kind of things that inform us. And a lot of times, the character model itself will inform us of what that is. But again, when you're working in games, it's like you try to pull all the information from the designers, the art directors, the creative directors, producers, and just get all that context. Right? So something that you don't want to be doing is kind of going in there blind, basically having a character, and maybe it was meant to be more of a ranged character, but you're animating it to be more like a melee character, like all these kind of like close up punches and uppercuts and stuff like that. And then someone's like, oh wait, this is supposed to be someone that kind of hangs out on the outside and kind of does damage that way. So though those are important things to do, and all these things here, they tend to contribute to what you're going to bring to the table, which is not just animation, but the idea behind it, right? Like how to make your combat more not generic, I guess, but more creative. And then third thing we'll talk about is the speed, flow, and energy, and that kind of goes with the second point, which is like, if you are a super tanky character, maybe you're not super fast. If you are a melee or ranged character, maybe you are fast. You kind of dash around. The way you move is very light on the feet. The flow, what I mean by flow is the flow of the combat, right? Most of the times combat is like comes in like 2, 3, 4 hit attacks, and do those flow properly? Or do you just carry this really heavy axe, and every time the player presses the button, you exert all this energy, but you have like a long cooldown or a long kind of like, you know, I guess kind of a freezing section of the animation where you can't really hit the button again, right? And that disrupts the flow. But maybe that's the point of the character, because it's like a heavy damage dealing character that could only, you know, throw that axe once every 2 seconds or something like that. And energy of itself, it's like, you know, whether your personality, tone, melee, ranged type character, energy plays a big part of it, because you know, you could be 600 pound character or like an 80-pound character, and that will determine all those three things: the speed, flow, and energy. And the last thing I look at or I think about is the camera angle, right? And there's kind of two ways to go about doing this, right? Like maybe you're creating this animation for a portfolio, you can determine your own camera angle. When you're making it for games, which is what we want to always be thinking about, is what is the camera angle of the game? You don't want to spend all your time in software, in Maya, and just be creating from a three-quarter angle and being like, this looks great from this angle. And you put in the game and it's like a top-down game, right? And you weren't looking at it from that angle ever before. So you always want to be thinking about how your combat reads from your camera angle. If it's like a top-down game where your characters are very small, maybe you need to exaggerate your movements so that they actually read properly. And if it's like really tight, close-up, like from behind the back type camera, maybe make those a bit more subtle so they don't be too loud on the screen and kind of give people headaches. So these are a lot of things to think about, but these are things that you should be thinking about. You know, create a checklist, and when you're brainstorming, when you're getting ready to start, these are the questions that you want to be asking yourself first. Okay. Next up, let's get into Maya and let's take a look at the rig we're using and the different weapons we'll be using in the next chapter.